I'm Riley De León. I'm a producer at CNBC, and I'd like to formally welcome and introduce our panelists, Jay Parikh, who is the co-CEO of Lacework, which is a cybersecurity company that made this year's Disruptor 50 list for the very first time, and Ivan Soto-Wright, who is the co-founder and CEO of MoonPay, which is a crypto trading platform that exists within the broader Web3 ecosystem, which we're going to be discussing in this session. MoonPay, also a first-time Disruptor 50 company that made this year's list. Thank you both for being here. Ivan, I think I want to start with you because for a lot of people, Web3 has become this very nebulous term that's meant to describe, as I understand it, the next iteration of the internet, right? Web 1 was all about being able to access this unprecedented amount of information almost instantaneously, not to mention for the first time at that scale. Web 2 was kind of about utilizing all of that information to write and create content on these social platforms. And now there's Web 3, which I think is probably best understood as an evolution of the former, Web 2, in the sense that you don't rent your content, your data, or what have you on these internet platforms, but you actually own it through decentralized technology. Can you just explain, I guess, in the simplest way possible, what that actually means and how a decentralized internet would even benefit its users? And I guess if you could as well, what role does interoperability play into all of this?
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me here. Super excited to be here. Great to be with you guys. I think the historical context you gave is great. So we talk about the internet. The first generation was really read only, right? You interact with these. We interact with these static web pages. Web 2 was being able to take it a step further, read, write. And these are all the social media applications that we love today, the Facebooks, the TikToks, the Twitters, and the rest. Really, Web 3, the central idea is around ownership. So it's read, write, and own. And at MoonPay, our vision is to unlock ownership for everyone. We really believe in this future where individuals should own and control their identity, their data, their property, and their money. And so for us, we really want to make that experience easier. I think the biggest barrier to adoption of this new technology is really around the usability. It's not the fact that the blockchains, obviously they need to scale, they need to perform, but we need to build more magical user experiences. And so, I guess, what is the benefit? Why is that important, this idea around ownership? Well, today, we don't really own our data, right? Our data is owned by these third parties in a lot of cases, and that can introduce a whole range of risks. I think today's topic is around some of the cybersecurity risks that result with that. And I see a future where really, I think the central idea around Web 3 is as long as you have access to the internet, cryptocurrency or comes from the word cryptography, and you essentially have this private key. That private key unlocks your wallet, which is going to house your identity, your data, your property, and your money. And you're going to be able to opt in. You're going to be in control when you access this whole range of different applications that are going to be built on the blockchain. We're still very early days, but it's probably the most exciting time right now as we're starting to see these use cases play out across a whole range of industries. And we're all about accelerating those use cases.
Right. That's interesting. And Jay, so I want to turn to you now because as a cybersecurity professional with the product and the engineering background that you have, when you hear someone like Ivan describe Web3 and its promise that way, what are some of the things that you might be concerned about? Because it kind of seems ironic to me that at a time when we're perhaps the most vulnerable that we've ever been to cyber attacks, and in some cases, really sophisticated cyber warfare from the likes of Russia and China, state-sponsored actors, that there's this crowd of people who are all in on this technology, which has barely, if at all, proven that it can effectively protect consumers and investors, or if we're talking about NFTs, collectors. How is it that we're so focused on this next iteration of the web when we haven't even really begun to meaningfully address the threats that we're facing with the internet in its current form?
Yeah, absolutely. So one is, I guess, thanks for having us, Riley. Nice to hang out with you for a little bit here, and Ivan. The thing that I would say is that's really important to understand here as these technologies or these changes happen in technology that we're going through, and you covered kind of Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3, and different people have kind of different explanations for those arcs, and what happens with the next Web 4 and beyond that, right? So I think it's interesting to just see how these waves come faster and faster as well, just given kind of what's happening in the world with data and with the cloud and with different technologies and whatnot. But I would say is, one of the, in the last 4 or 5 years, 3, 4, 5 years, one of the most popular and probably fastest growing risk to a business is actually crypto jacking, which is basically the illicit or bad use of crypto mining. So every company out there that builds and is building and is transforming their business to be online and digital and data and applications and growing their business, acquisitions, whatnot, one of the biggest exposures that happen in a stack is actually being used for these behaviors of crypto mining illegally, right, or illicitly. And so when we look at this from this wave is happening, these applications, Ivan's company is working on a different mission here, and there's a bunch of other companies here. But then you look at the folks that are building stuff in the cloud, and it's like, they have risk in their environment. They leave certain windows cracked or doors, open, and the amount of activity that happens and how fast that is actually then used to compromise a kind of a cloud infrastructure to be used for crypto mining, which listen, it can cost a company a lot of money when somebody jumps in and starts like doing a bunch of mining on your cloud account. It can cost you a lot of money. Then they actually have a foothold in your account, in your infrastructure, which they could use for other compromises, right? So that's the other side of this, which is like with this innovation comes this other new vector or new surface area of risk in a business.
Right, and I guess if I could take that, Jay, a step further, and I'd love to hear what you think about this too, Ivan. But Jay, what would broader regulation mean when it comes to crypto and other digital assets? So yesterday, I made note of this, that Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer, he's somebody who has become one of the more outspoken bulls in government when it comes to Web3 technology. He tweeted that decentralization is the point. If we sacrifice DeFi, decentralized finance, for legislation, then we're throwing away the opportunity. So I guess knowing that, or considering that, my question would be, what do you see as the potential threats to the broader industry if this technology, especially given that its entire objective is to remain decentralized and really kind of give power back to the people, for lack of a better phrase? What's at risk if that technology is more heavily regulated? And then to Congressman Emmer's point about opportunity, what might be the advantage to having an institutional authority step in and say, hey, we recognize the groundswell of interest here. We're going to put guardrails in place so that these platforms that people are flocking to actually protect the interests of everybody who's involved.
Yeah, Ivan, do you want to start on the regulatory side? You probably have more to say.
Yeah. Well, I think one point, just around the security point first, before we go into regulation. You can think of it as you have like a chunk of armor, right? That should be protecting your identity, your data, your property, and your money. And today we have a bunch of third parties that are responsible, that hold on to that very valuable data, all this personal information. And so essentially you can think about it as just, you could have more chunks in your armor because your data, you're trusting with all these different third parties. And so you introduce a lot of risk that way. Now the risk falls, the risk shifts, it falls back on the user. And ultimately we want to get to a place where there's a user experience component, right?
And by the way, that is the difference from Web3 compared to Web 1 and Web 2, right? You've got all of these different stakeholders who are basically carrying the torch and bearing the responsibility.
Exactly. And it just takes one, you hear about these breaches all the time, just one cybersecurity breach at one of these companies in which you're trusting your data, and your data can leak, right? And so now the idea is we're putting the responsibility built back on the user. And so that means that we're going to have to invest in education. We're going to have to invest in the user experience. People are going to have to understand this concept of layering. I think people are now learning the risk of using a password multiple times across multiple platforms. And I think password managers are doing a really good job. But there's a lot of, when I think about the risk, a lot of it comes down to cleanliness around how you rotate your keys, introducing things like 2FA. it comes back on the user. You're ultimately in charge. And so I think it's the responsibility of the industry to build really easy tools if you are going to be in control of your identity, your data, your property, and your money. As it comes to regulation, as we've seen in the news over the last couple cycles, there are obviously some bad actors at play. And ultimately, that's not good for anyone, right? And so we need to find ways to remove those bad actors. And I think when I think about regulation, it comes down to safeguarding the consumer. Like, how do we protect the consumer in this new environment where they're going to have this increased level of responsibility? I think that if you're going to invest your money into something like a new digital asset, you want to know what you're investing in. So it comes down to education. One of the areas that I think is really interesting to me has been around stablecoins. I think stablecoins are an incredible innovation, especially US dollar-backed stablecoins. And many countries around the world, they're developing countries. They suffer from high rates of inflation. The promise of stablecoins, a US dollar coin that they can access, is quite valuable. But if they're going to be investing in something that's labeled as a US dollar digital currency, you want to know that it's backed by real US dollars in a bank account.
I just want to cut in there really quick, because I'm glad you brought that up, because MoonPay's pitch to investors is that it offers a gateway to digital assets, right? And we've had all this recent market volatility and this sort of risk-off investor environment as of late. Not only has it not been kind to crypto trading and token holders, but bringing it back to the point about regulation, it doesn't really inspire regulators to step in favorably for a company like yours in this emerging industry, does it?
I think we're going to go through waves of adoption, right? And I think over time, it's becoming safer and safer and safer. When we started, there was a lot of illicit activity, very similar to the early internet, right? Early internet, there was a ton of illicit activity, and those bad actors eventually got rooted out. And consumers got smarter. They got smarter around phishing attacks, and phishing attacks still present a problem today. But this is the technology of the future. I don't think it's going away. I just think that we need to make it easier for consumers to interact with it in a safe way.
Mm-hmm. And Jay, did you want to weigh in on that? Before you do, just for our audience here, if anybody has questions for these two, please, again, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can try to get to those. But Jay, I'll let you weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ivan, I think there's, I guess I disagree that those bad actors went away. I think those bad actors just have gotten a lot smarter. They have the same, they have the same access to technology, whether it be blockchain or the cloud or AI or GPUs or whatever it is. You look at the breaches, you look at the damages that happen to businesses, not only big enterprises, but also, companies in the Web3 space. There's just always going to be this behavior in the world, right? So if there is incentives there to attack something and to compromise something, there always will be. I think the thing to be careful about, or to be open-minded about and assertive about in Web3 is just be learning quickly how the attack profiles change over time as these new use cases get built, these new companies like yours get built, as consumers adopt different applications, whatever it may be, to just be learning really fast as to where the risk is emerging. It's not going away, and there's no technology that is, zero risk. I fail to believe that. And so just making sure companies are working together in whether it be regulation, whether it be technology. Here at Lacework, we take a data-driven approach to understanding kind of what the proactive and the reactive security profile is for all companies. So finding ways to kind of just be able to learn and proactively reduce risk, as well as reactively understand it, respond faster and faster, right? Things just happen much faster these days. You look at these compromises, somebody leaps open a credential in the cloud today. It can be within seconds that credential is used. Somebody gets into your cloud account and starts crypto mining, right? Within seconds. It happens so fast these days.
So Jay, taking into consideration those attack profiles and that risk, as you see it, what are some things that people involved in this space should be doing right now to bolster their cyber defenses, given that more and more people are becoming enthusiastic about this space despite all of these threats that we face?
Yeah, listen, I think it's just a conversation that's just, top of mind for everybody, right? If you are supporting customers, if you have and are supporting, financial transactions, goods, services, whatever it is, it's showing up more and more across the company. It's a, board mandate at most companies. It's being regulated in many jurisdictions as well. And I think there's just a whole new flurry of activity around how to do this kind of world-class or best-in-class. Obviously, our focus is primarily helping companies protect their infrastructure, their application, their data, their employees, their customers in the cloud, right? And that is also just very different than what it was on-prem when people built their own data centers and put up, servers and applications. The risk profile and the attack profiles that are existing out there in the cloud with the public clouds is just different. So, looking at kind of what you can do proactively in terms of as you're building your applications, as you're building your business, what you can be doing to sort of understand and reduce risk proactively before things are actually out there kind of live and in the wild. And then also, how do you understand what's happening from a risk perspective as the thing is living and breathing in production, right? Your application, your data, your users are consuming your application. You want to be able to understand. For us, what we do is we understand kind of what the baseline performance is or the baseline behavior is in an application, in an infrastructure, and then we can detect what is anomalous there. So if there is a compromise, if you didn't catch something, you left something open, at build time, and then in runtime, we can help you understand like where that compromise came from, how long has it been there, what is the impact to your business, and being able to then remediate it, being able to collect the evidence that you may need for incident reporting, incident management, et cetera. So these are all kind of like, the things that you have to be understanding, or you have to put effort into and have a language and a discipline around in an enterprise. Right.
And we're just about out of time, but just, Ivan, having heard that from Jay, when you think about your own platform, and we've talked a lot about regulation, this session may as well have been just as much about regulation as it is about cybersecurity, because it turns out, I think in some ways they go hand in hand. But how might you think about your platform and other platforms that are emerging in this space when it comes to welcoming constructive regulation that might help alleviate some of those concerns, in the space, like I was saying earlier, for consumers, for investors, for the token holders on your platform, and not just you. There's a lot of platforms emerging in this space that need to be taking these things into consideration as well. What can you speak to the kind of premium that you put on that, I guess, what Jay was alluding to?
Yeah, I think now, as I mentioned, there's a shift in the responsibility, right, back to the individual. And so now the individual is going to have to go through education. And I think, just to clear my point earlier, it's not like malicious actors are going away. It's definitely true that malicious actors are getting smarter. But I think it's up to the industry to build the tools to make this safer, right? That's ultimately, for us, we're constantly researching best practices. It's not, a set and forget approach. It's constantly iterating. There's always new threat areas that we have to invest in proactively, right? To think through as a business, how do we make sure that we are well positioned for these new threats that emerge? So,
right.
I think it's continuous. One of the words that we use inside our company is Kaizen, which literally means change for the better or continuous improvement. And so I think you have to now, as an individual, now that you have that responsibility, there's going to be an education piece.
Right.
That's super, super important.
Right. Kaizen, I like that. Change for the better. I think that's a pretty good note to end on.